Good evening to everyone here on the East Coast, and good morning to those of you tuning in from South Korea. Welcome to our very special Wilson Center Korea event featuring Congresswoman Jane Harman and some of her very favorite Korea experts. I'm Jean Lee. I'm the director of the Hyundai Motor Korea Foundation Center for Korean History and Public Policy here at the Wilson Center. And I'm joined tonight by Abe Denmark, director of the Wilson Center's Asia program. We're missing our comrade Christian Osterman, director of the History and Public Policy program, but he sends his regards. As many of you know, Jane Harman will be stepping down as president and CEO of the Wilson Center at the end of the month after a decade of service. She leaves behind at least one very notable legacy, and that is the Korea Center. So we Korea Watchers are so lucky to have had such a champion for Korean issues in Jane Harman. In 2015, she teamed up with Hyundai Motor and the Korea Foundation to launch the Korea Center, and in doing so, created a space where scholars, policymakers, and journalists like me are able to carry out in-depth research to help shape policy on North Korea and South Korea today. And I dare say the Korea Center has served as a bridge between Seoul and Washington, as you'll see today. Now, before we let Congresswoman Harman and our special guest speak, I want to share some photos from her years here as our Korean grandmother. She does have two Korean granddaughters of her own, with her son Dan and her daughter-in-law Jackie. But as you'll soon see, she's got even deeper and lasting ties to South Korea that I'm sure will not end with the close of this chapter of her career. Olivia, can you show us the video? Can all of you see this? Is it not playing the music?
No.
Okay. So there is some music to go with it, but hopefully you'll recognize some of your old friends. There's the surfboard.
Yeah, James
in his handbook.
Person, yeah. Christian, here it is.
Korea Foundation. The signing of the agreement.
Right. Oh.
That's cute.
Sweet.
So I hope you enjoyed that. We'll pull all those pictures together for you. But I think you wanted to say a few words. Can we hand the floor over to you?
Well, I'd be delighted before the serious part of the program starts, and I'm looking at my screen and I see Mark Lippert and lots of people who have been part of this journey. Let me just say first, as you know, if I get the pronunciation sort of right, I'm a homini pavo, which I think means crazy grandmother, or that's what it's supposed to mean. And I have two grandchildren who are part Korean and beautiful. And my grandmother is Korean, and my daughter-in-law is part Korean too. And Korea's always been of great interest to me, in case you don't know this, because I come from Los Angeles, and there's a gigantic Korean diaspora there. And the Korean Peace Bell and some of the other evidence of Korea, especially in Torrance, California, were in my congressional district. So it was a big part of my 9 terms in Congress, a big part of my family life, and a big part of my Wilson life. And you're all in my Wilson life. And leaving after a decade is bittersweet. I feel I have helped to accomplish a lot. We had a Korea program before we had the Hyundai program, but now we have a big Korea program, which we did not have before. And we had support from all of you before we had the Hyundai program, but now we have bigger support, and we have Jean. And so I'm grateful for that. I was thinking of a few memories that that I got reminded of in the slides. When I first came, I was invited on a trip to go to Kyungnam University by many good friends. I hope they're watching. And I was given an honorary degree, and it was a big deal and a beautiful thing. And thank you. And President Park of Kyungnam, always after that, whenever I would come to Korea, would send me flowers. And I remember on one occasion, they had a card in them, and it said, "Welcome to Seoul." Seoul was spelled S-O-U-L. And aside from being very funny, it was actually very true. I mean, Korea has a soul. South Korea has a soul. And anyone who's been to North Korea, as Jean lived there for a long time, but I have actually been there too, wonders whether North Korea has a soul. Hopefully it will. Certainly a common history, and maybe someday reunited. But at any rate, I spent a lot of time there, many trips, met with many public officials, including our friend Pak on this call when he was a big shot. He's still a big shot, but he was a very big shot, and the rest of you. And I just, I think what I want to say is that South Korea has part of my heart, and that I'm not leaving South Korea. I'm not really leaving, except in a formal sense, the Wilson Center and the experiences there. And I will always be extremely interested in the issues and cheering all of you from wherever I end up. I mean, I'm not retiring. I think that's a strange word, and it certainly does not apply to me. But wherever I am next, I will be paying attention to this. So please know that. And thank you from the bottom of my heart for all of the ways that you have touched me. And thank you to Jean and Abe for doing such a good job stewarding our program and making sure that it rises from excellence to more excellence. And just a last note, there is a rating service for think tanks. I think you're all aware. And the Wilson Center has been rated #1 in regional expertise for 3 years in a row. And now we got some super duper prize, like the lifetime prize for regional expertise in the last rating a month ago. So, I mean, how much better can it be? It's glorious, and always count on us. So let me just say that I will participate in the panel, but and make a few comments more about each of you. But I just am very grateful to be recognized this way and to see so many dear friends, really. And so as a Korean grandmother, just know grandmothers are forever. Thank you very much.
I'd like to invite Yong Sun, who's the Chief Executive of Hyundai Motors DC office, and Min Jung Kim, Director of the Korea Foundation's DC office, to say a few words.
Good evening, Congressman Harman. Good to see you again. Ambassador Han, Ambassador Lippert, Congressman Park, and invited guests. And good morning to those of you joining us for this virtual event from Korea. My name is Yong Sun, and I'm the Chief Executive Coordinator here at the Hyundai Motor Company Washington office. It is an honor to speak with you today on behalf of our company, Hyundai. And it is a privilege for me to offer our sincere congratulations and best wishes to Congresswoman Harman as she says farewell. Congresswoman, during your 10 years as President, Director, and CEO of the Woodrow Wilson Center, you have been an exemplary leader who has taken the organization to new heights. Obviously, around the world, the Wilson Center is known for being the premier forum for addressing global issues. And Hyundai has been really honored to work with you to establish the Wilson Center's Hyundai Motor Korea Foundation Center for Korea History and Public Policy. You have been very instrumental in building this legacy that will live on and continue to promote a better understanding of Korea and the U.S.-Korea alliance. We will forever be grateful for your vision and your determination to bring this program to life. As you begin this new chapter, please know that how much we have valued our partnership over the years. Our chairman, Usan Jung, and our leadership team wish you the very best in your future endeavors and look forward to the day when they can all meet you in person once again. Congratulations, Congresswoman, on building such a strong foundation on which the rest of us can continue to build. Thank you, and again, our best wishes.
Thank you very much. Thank you. My warm regards to my friends in Korea. And my friend Chung has become he's the CEO now. They tell him I'm very, very impressed.
Thank you. We'll definitely deliver that message to him.
Okay.
Min Jung, would you like to say a few words?
Yes. Good evening. Nice to meet you all online. This is Min Jung Kim, Director of Korea Foundation Washington, D.C. office. It is such an honor and pleasure for me to join this special event today and convey a few words to Congresswoman Jane Harman on behalf of the Korea Foundation. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. The Korea Foundation has worked closely with its partners and friends to strengthen the ROK-US alliance, helping people better understand Korea and foster global friendship. In this light, we have long enjoyed a fruitful relationship with Woodrow Wilson Center to broaden the horizons of our alliance and extend into new frontiers. Woodrow Wilson Center is undoubtedly one of the best think tanks with outstanding commitment. And in particular, among many think tanks in town, it stands out with a robust scholarship from lots of experts in the field of international relations, as well as its unique and valuable collection of historic documents. Undertaking the tremendous task of leading highly recognized think tank in the world, Jane Harman showed her outstanding leadership and accomplishments with relentless endeavor. The partnership between the Korea Foundation and the Woodrow Wilson Center has been greatly strengthened and entered its new phase during the presidency of Jane. In particular, we were glad to see the launch of Center for Korean History and Public Policy in 2015. Since then, we have been witnessing quite a diverse array of activities, from establishment of historic document database to publication of great research papers on important current issues about Korea, The center also convenes countless roundtables, seminars, and special lectures to bring the experts from 2 countries together and discuss thoughts and views for a better future of the world. Without Jane's leadership and initiatives, and also a high interest in Korean Peninsula, all of this would not have been possible. We will look forward to continued partnership between Korea Foundation and Woodrow Wilson Center at this critical time. And I believe many experts like Jean and Abe will continue to bring together great ideas on Korea-related research. Lastly, let me convey to you the warmest farewell from all of our colleagues from the Korea Foundation and Dr. Lee, our president. And we wish you the best with new journey for the next chapter of your life. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're turning now to the substantive portion of our discussion. Jane, I've said it to you privately, but I'll say it to you publicly too, just to thank you for your service to the Wilson Center, to the nation, both as a member of Congress and as the head of the Wilson Center for the past decade. And I think the Korea Center is just one of the many legacies that you leave behind from your time here. So we've put together a terrific panel to discuss the future of our alliance, the US-ROK alliance, between now and the end of the session at 8:30 Eastern time. I should note that we scheduled this to be in morning in Korea, but it is also bedtime in the Denmark household. So if you hear small children screaming in the background, that is my wife doing her best to put down 2 kids by herself. So with that as an apology, I'll introduce our incoming panel and then turn things over to the moderator. Of course, our first panelist, Jane Harman, needs no introduction in normal circumstances and has already received a fulsome introduction through this, but also just to note as President and CEO of the Wilson Center and also someone with deep expertise in Korea, going back even longer than her decade at the Wilson Center, including a visit to North Korea as a member of the U.S. Congress. So somebody, one of the Americans with deepest expertise in the entire Korean Peninsula. In addition to her, we have Ambassador Mark Lippert, formerly served as ambassador to the United States, an informal ambassador for Korean baseball, and I think equally important, the owner of Grigsby the Basset Hound, who has his own Twitter account and is very popular in Korea. Next, our former ROK to the United States, Ambassador An. Thank you so much for joining us. I mentioned Ambassador An served as a terrific tour as ambassador to the United States, capping off a illustrious career in the foreign ministry, and now serving as president of the University of North Korean Studies in Korea. And finally, our moderator for this evening, this morning, Jin Park, Dr. Jin Park, who's most known as a member of Congress in the National Assembly in Korea, having come back after a break in academia, and the break in academia, including a term as a global fellow at the Wilson Center.
All right. Right.
And so we will, as Jane is about to learn, as Dr. Park knows, with the Wilson Center, you may leave formally, but you never really leave. So we thank you all for agreeing to participate in this panel. We'll have each of you give some opening thoughts, and I'll moderate the Q&A afterwards. And I'll turn things over to our moderator, Dr. Jin Park.
Well, thank you, Abe. And especially I'm grateful to be invited to this wonderful gathering of good old friends, Jane Harman, who has made a wonderful contribution to the global peace and prosperity, and especially for strengthening the Korea-US alliance as the president, director, and CEO of the Wilson Center. And also, I'm very grateful to Jin Lee for organizing and inviting me to serve as the moderator of this prestigious panel. I'm very happy to learn that the Korea Center has been strongly supported by Hyundai Motors and Korea Foundation, and grow from strength to strength to bridge the role between Korea and the United States and to promote our friendship and partnership. So my congratulations on Jane Harman and Jin Lee and Abe Denmark for outstanding leadership at the Wilson Center. Also, I'm very happy to meet with my old friend, Mark Lippert, who was a great ambassador and has a great friend of Korea, and also a great fan of the Korean baseball playing. And I hope that we can get together again in Seoul when the corona pandemic subsides so that we can continue our dialogue. And also I'm very happy to meet with my good friend, Ambassador An, who is a distinguished diplomat and also now the leader of the great university in Korea, especially focusing on North Korea. My first question as a moderator to Jane Harman and Mark Lippert is, what is the current mood and situation in Washington? We have seen a dramatic and turbulent political changes in the states in the aftermath of the US presidential election. We have seen the Capitol insurrection, we have seen the inauguration, and also impeachment proceedings, and so on. And so I wonder if there are any continuing concern about the political divisiveness in the states, also any possible rise of nationalism, or any concern about the political instabilities in Washington. What is your view on the current situation there? Jane, may I ask you a question?
Right. Well, let me say something about you first. In addition to your impressive political career and academic career, you also had a career as an officiant at a wedding. I remember this. Jean's predecessor, James Person, married a Korean graduate student named June, beautiful graduate student. And who was the officiant at the wedding? Park Jin. So that was a very cool Wilson Center event back in the day. And to Mark, I'm sure you'll answer after me. I vividly remember, well, I remember lots of things about your excellent turn in South Korea, but I know you have two kids, both of whom have Korean middle names. It's a big deal to you. And I also know, and this was a scary chapter in your life, that you were personally a victim of domestic terrorism in Korea. You were very brave about it and, carried on. And I think a serious answer to this question, certainly in the US, there is a rise in domestic terrorism that is not coming from an extreme form of the Muslim religion. This is homegrown. These are Americans, not that some Muslims aren't Americans, but these are Americans, and highly armed and highly organized and mobilized by social media in most cases and other ways. And I think we have to be very concerned about it. We also have to be concerned not just to use law enforcement against it, but we have to, it seems to me, try to understand what motivates these people and intervene before they engage in violence, hopefully steer them away from violence. And I think this is going to be a gigantic challenge for our country. And obviously we all saw it, not just those of us who were in the US, I'm in Washington, on January 6th, when for the first time in our history, even including the Civil War, our Capitol was attacked, and Confederate flags and anti-Semitic T-shirts and all kinds of weapons were used inside to desecrate the Capitol. And at least possibly some of our senior political figures, including our vice president, could have been killed. I mean, it was shocking and stunning. And we have not fully recovered from it. And I endorse this notion of setting up a commission, a January 6th commission, to understand not just what happened, but how we can prevent it from happening again. And final comment I would make is that one of the reasons I left Congress to come to the Wilson Center, which I have always said was a better job, not that Congress was not an honor, but I left because of the partisanship in Congress. I was so tired of this business model we seem to have, which is one party blaming the other party for not solving the problem. Because if you work together to solve the problem, whatever the problem is, then you are bipartisan, and that is makes you very vulnerable in your next election. And so the forces push people apart, which I think is extremely unhealthy. And just to bring it to Korea, I don't think partisanship, US partisanship in particular, is playing out on the Korean Peninsula, but I think it takes so much energy out of the conversation that the focus we need to have on the Korean Peninsula, especially on what is going on in North Korea with the increase in nuclear weapons, long-range missiles, harsh rhetoric, isn't there. President Trump, rightly, at the beginning of his term, began to focus on North Korea, but his focus was not successful, and he turned to other things. And now I don't see a focus, or much of a focus. And maybe I'd like to be corrected by Mark and others on this call, but I think North Korea needs to be a major focus of the U.S. Nuclear, the increase in nuclear arsenals and nuclear proliferation have to be a focus. And South Korea's valiant efforts toward reunification, which I know many of you care about and I applaud, but also toward better governance and being the right kind of neighbor in the region, need attention too. So I don't think the problems are going away. I think, sadly, though, this rise in domestic terrorism is going to take much of the energy away from problems that deserve it.
Thank you, Jane. Mark, can you say a few words about the situation in the States?
Yeah, I think first, let me just say, let me add my congratulations to the really successful tenure of Congresswoman Harman, and just I saw some of those images there from the 2016 visit, in which she saw the president, the prime minister, the foreign minister, better access than I had in Korea as ambassador. So let me just say that.
But I'm a Korean grandmother, and you're not.
It's true. It's true. You have sort of the secret code. You've broken the code. So congratulations, and just a couple of things, just to the Wilson Center writ large. Congratulations under your study leadership, Congresswoman, the outstanding work you're doing on the Alliance. Thanks to the Korea Foundation, and thanks to Hyundai for sponsoring this. And I would just say to Hyundai, maybe another panel is something about resuscitating the once great Hyundai Unicorns baseball team, 4-time KBO champs. It's coming up on a 15-year anniversary. So anyway, with that, a more serious and somber subject, I would just say the Congresswoman really covered the landscape well. I'll just make 3 quick points in an international context. I think Secretary of State Blinken was interviewed on NPR. He got this question. He addressed it head on, and he basically said the events were shocking. They have had global ramifications. People raise them and ask questions about U.S. influence over the long term as a result of these events. Having said that, he said it's precisely because we are so resilient as a country that we can address them head on, that we can rebound, that we can do 50, 60 phone calls with foreign ministers, as the secretary outlined, he was personally, and start a path, start moving in a different direction. I think that brings me to the next point, which is I do think that we've got a president who is interested in resetting the United States relationships around the world. Pak Jin Wiwanim, you asked a question about nationalism. Sure, there are elements in the domestic situation that Congresswoman Harman outlined, but I think that are, you have to keep an eye on, because this is a democracy. But having said that, the United States resoundingly elected a president who is an internationalist, and public opinion poll after public opinion poll continues to bear that out. I'll stop on this final point, which is I do think it will be an important, it's a very important inflection point. The world is very different in 2020 than it was in 16. That President Biden inherits, that 4-year gap. It's a very different world that's going to require different thinking. The team, I think, that he's assembled is very good, top shelf, and I think we are poised. But, and I'll stop here, we are, as the president has made it clear, not going to do this alone. It is going to be partners, friends, and allies, emphasis on allies, emphasis on Korea, that really will undergird US foreign policy going forward. And I'll stop there.
Well, thank you. Certainly, I think we are in a very critical juncture in our Korea-US relationship, not least because of the political change in Washington and the inauguration of the new Biden administration. We have seen the lineup of the policy experts in the White House, in the State Department, in the Biden administration. We have seen people like Antony Blinken, who is now new Secretary of State, Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor, people like Kurt Campbell, the Indo-Pacific Coordinator at the NSC, and Wendy Sherman, the Deputy Secretary. What would be the policy initiatives as you foresee of the Biden administration towards Asia and especially on the Korean Peninsula? Mark, you have any view? You might know most of these people in the State Department and White House.
Yeah, no, I do know them. They're good friends. As I said before, I think it's an excellent lineup, and you underscored some of the very active minds that will, I think, capably guide this administration forward in Asia. I won't, I think it's early days. So to start predicting is, I think, something that would probably be a bit premature. But what I would say is they are, 1, pragmatic, 2, internationalist, and 3, undertaking all sorts of comprehensive reviews as we speak right now. I'm sure they're burning the midnight oil over there. I do think there will be a focus on China, as we've seen early on out of the gates, in terms of what is a driver of their policy in the Asia Pacific. But I would say they are taking a page out of the Obama playbook, I think, reading the tea leaves, in running an alliance first strategy. In other words, that operating under the theory that you are far better off if the alliances, and I would also argue your friends and partnerships in Asia Pacific, are strong, and to the extent practicable, you can align your goals. There will be some delta, there will be some difference, but the effort to put an emphasis on these allies, I think undergirds their entire policy as it pertains to China. Final point I would say, I think you saw it, I think today with Secretary Blinken's call to the Indonesian foreign minister, I think some early outreach at high levels to India. I think you're also going to see an emphasis on other emerging countries like India and Indonesia, as well as the multilateral framework throughout Asia. So I think those pieces are going to be there. Final get off the stage thing, I would say, emphasis on what does it mean for the Korean Peninsula? I mean, we can get into the whole, what does it mean for the Koreans vis-a-vis China policy? But I would say, first things first, I think you're going to see a very focused administration on leveling, right sizing, and reframing the alliance in a much more traditional and much more focused way. And I'll stop there.
Thank you, Mark. Jane, can you tell us about President Joe Biden? You might know him very well through your.
Well, I do, but first of all, Abe, your daughter was adorable. I think I just saw her in your lap, and this makes this grandma very proud to see little children running around with their families. I do know Joe Biden, and I met him when he was a young senator, and I worked as a staff lawyer in the Senate long time ago. And he is by far the most experienced foreign policy president we have had since George H.W. Bush in the late 80s and early 90s. He has much more experience than his 4 predecessors, Clinton, Bush, Obama, and Trump. He also has the best team, I think. And you mentioned a lot of them. And so did Mark. I hope you all saw Jake Sullivan in that slideshow that Gene put together. He's been at the Wilson Center. Tony Blinken's been at the Wilson Center. These are friends of ours over a long time. But I think that Joe Biden is proving himself to be steady and quiet and has a process underneath him that will make him well prepared to make good decisions. That doesn't mean every decision he makes will be good, but let's hope. And as Mark said, it is early days. I just make one more comment. I applauded President Trump in my nonpartisan way for an initial focus on North Korea. I thought that was right. I don't applaud him. In fact, I would criticize him for pulling out of TPP, the trade alliance with Asia, so quickly. I think that was a mistake. I think the whole idea behind an economic trade alliance in Asia was to build a trading bloc as a buffer against, in part, against China. It's not that we don't all have trading relationships with China, but we have complicated relationships with China. And the Obama idea of pivoting to Asia with a trade alliance, I thought was the right idea. And it's very sad to me that we pulled out. And the good news is the rest of Asia is pretty much sort of in the alliance without us, but we are not setting the rules of the road. And I do think with US leadership, we would be farther along, and it's a loss. Last comment about China. Everyone is talking about China, and it's a complex relationship. I hope we manage it well, and we do cooperation and competition and not war. South Korea has a major role to play in helping to shape that relationship and working with us to shape that relationship. So I totally agree with Mark that reviving our alliances and supporting our friends is going to be a key part of whether the Biden administration succeeds.
Thank you, Jane. Let me turn to the Korean reaction to the political change in the new leadership in Washington. I was personally very relieved to see the overcoming of political crisis in the states and the restoration of constitutional democracy despite these violent things happening there. I was also encouraged when President Biden, when he was doing his own campaign, and also after inauguration, that America is back, and he would certainly respect the alliance and strengthen the alliance network, and employ a multilateral approach to the international issues for peace and prosperity. I think that Korea-US relationship should move into the direction of predictable and mutually respectful and value-driven partnership, because our alliance is based on core values like democracy and free markets and human rights and rule of law. But I also see a potential issues and conflicts between the Biden administration and the Moon government in terms of how to deal with North Korea, how to materialize the substantial denuclearization of the North, and also the human rights issue in North Korea, which is very serious. So I'd like to invite Ambassador An Ho-young about the Korean reaction to the political change in the States, and what kind of policy initiatives do you foresee and expect from the Biden administration?
Well, first thing first, so let me start with a few words upon the chairmanship and the presidency of Jane Harman at the Woodrow Wilson Center. And during my time in Washington, D.C., then of course, one of the things I used to do was to come and visit large number of think tanks in Washington, D.C. And then whenever I came to Woodrow Wilson Center, I always said to myself, it is rather special, uniquely special whenever I come to Woodrow Wilson Center. And then the reason could be because I felt like part of the family. And Jane always treated me as a part of the family. And then we used to invite each other to our home, especially when we used to have family members. and
Right.
that as well as Jane being a harmony bubble. So all of that always made me feel very special whenever I came to Woodrow Wilson Center. But at the same time, I was listening to Jane very closely, and one sentence really attracted my attention, which is that I'm stepping down, but I'm not retiring. And then, as a matter of fact, that's something I really wanted to hear from you, because you have so many things to do. Still, so many things to do for the United States, for the world, for Korea-US relationship. So I very much hope that you will never retire. So when COVID comes down, the first thing you must put on your program would be come and visit with us. Come and visit Seoul. As you
Seoul.
said, come and visit Seoul. Right. Well, with respect to this question, which has been raised by Congressman Park, the reaction from Korea with respect to the election of President Biden. Well, if there is one word to describe the reaction in Korea, I think it would be enthusiasm. There was enthusiastic approval of or welcoming of Mr. Biden's election in the United States. Why? Well, as a matter of fact, I've been listening to Congressman Park, Mark Lippert, and Jane Harman, and then all of it put together. I think that's why his election as a president was welcomed so much. And then at the same time, I was listening to what Mark had to say with respect to this dream team, the cream of US foreign and security policy, which in fact have been put into the team of President Biden's team of foreign and security team. Whenever I see that list, I cannot but smile. Why? Because I know how good they are. It's a dream team of dream team. And I really think that what we have to be looking forward to would be this, which is that this is a terrific team, and how much this terrific team could be delivering. And then I think one key factor, this dream team could be delivering as much as they should do, would be how to manage the relationship with its allies. And I'm so glad that President Biden, as well as Tony Blinken, as well as everybody else in the team, they made it very clear one key ingredient of Biden presidency would be further strengthening alliance, including Korea-US alliance. Yes. So I really look forward to, well, coming 4 years or 8 years, through which we could, the United States, coming back to leadership role and Korea-US relationship being further strengthened. And along the way, we could be putting together meaningful policies to advance North Korean nuclear issue. And I totally agree with Jane when Jane said, well, again, wearing bipartisan hat, Jane said, well, I supported President Trump putting so much focus early on North Korean nuclear issue, even if, well, of course, you could say all different things about the details. And I also heard Jane very closely when Jane said, well, I hope it will be done by Biden team as well. And I very much hope that I'll be able to see that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador An. The new Biden administration will certainly review the North Korean policy of the previous Trump administration and also the US-China relationship at this moment about how to deal with the rise of China, assertive China, and how to cooperate with Korea, Japan, Australia, and India in the Indo-Pacific region to maintain peace and stability and to promote prosperity. So, Jane, can you say a few more words about the new Biden administration's perspective towards China and what kind of policy initiatives you expect from the new administration? And also, I would like to ask for a view from Mark Lippert.
Yeah.
Well,
you probably know that we have a China program at the Wilson Center called the Kissinger Institute on China and the US. And Henry Kissinger is only 97 and a half years young, and he is still vital. There was another tribute to me last week, and Henry did a video, which was amazing. Amazing. But he comes around, and he is still one of the deepest thinkers on the US-China relationship, which he began. I mean, he opened the door. It's very complicated. I think that in the US, in both political parties, the views of China have hardened. People are very disappointed with China's human rights policy, especially what's happening to the Uyghurs and what happened in Hong Kong. I think a lot of people in the US thought that Trump administration should have done more about Hong Kong, and now the next worry is Taiwan. So that's one thing. I think China's aggressive approach using cyber attacks in the US and I assume elsewhere, and its theft of intellectual property and bad practices like that have got people also upset. On the other hand, there are some opportunities with China. One, as a trading partner, which would, help the U.S. and the whole region, and that's hopefully a positive one. I mean, again, if these intellectual property and other issues could be more effectively resolved. And the second one is on climate. This will be a huge priority for the Biden administration. He's appointed John Kerry as his climate czar. There will be this gigantic climate meeting later this year. And if China and the US don't work together on climate, there is no solution to climate. And we are the biggest polluters, US and China, on the planet. They have bigger population, but we're big polluters. So I would just say that it will be a big focus of the Biden administration, China. And my hope is what I said before, which is that we, the US or the Biden administration, will work with allies in the region and around the world on the China problem, so that we are not just going alone, which was something the Trump administration did, I think, too much of, but that we are a indispensable partner to the rest of the world, learning from the rest of the world, especially those in the region, but also working with the rest of the world. And I think if we do that, we have the best chance of coming up with something Henry Kissinger would support, which is a nuanced China strategy that is tougher than the one he used to believe in. He says it is time to get tougher on China.
It looks like Dr. Park may have frozen. But that's okay, because we're at the Q&A portion anyway of this. So I can drive the Q&A portion. We are moderating. We are monitoring incoming questions. Jane, you often want to have a question burning in your mind for these panels. I want to give you the opportunity to ask the first question of the panel if you have any.
I've asked so many questions. I think, I don't know who's on the panel or who's off the panel, but, and by the way, Ambassador An, I loved your comment. We would have many family gatherings between us when you were in Washington. Maybe I would give the right of the first question to Jean, because Jean has lived in Pyongyang for 2 years. She studied North Korea extensively. She brings a huge amount of knowledge to the Wilson Center. And maybe, Jean, you would like to share something and with the others.
Well, I would like to, is Congressman Park back on? Do we have him back? No.
Yes, he's back.
No, he's muted. Now he's muted.
Okay. While he gets back on, I would like to ask Ambassador An, one of the things that we're seeing is that North Korea has closed its borders. There's very little access into North Korea. What are you hearing from your scholars at the University of North Korean Studies about what's happening inside North Korea, and what kind of research is going on at your university that might help us understand what might be happening inside North Korea during this time when we've been shut out for the past year? Is there anything you can share?
Well, Jean, thank you for the question. Last month in January, there was a party congress in Pyongyang, and it was 8th party congress. And there was certain limited volume of video strip being put on Korean TVs. very limited portions. And I was watching them very closely. Then I was really, really impressed about one aspect of that Eighth Party Congress, which was the overall tone of the Congress was so dark and somber. And I was wondering what could be the explanation for this uniquely dark and somber tone of Party Congress. You could think about that in the sense that Party Congress that happens place only at 5 years interval in large number of communist countries, and in North Korea it didn't happen for several decades. And then the only time when it came back to be held again at regular interval was back in 2016. And then after 5 years, they were holding that Party Congress. And then if you are holding it every 5 years, one of the things you should be doing would be some kind of celebration to cheer everybody up. Even if things are difficult, then when all your leaders are coming together, then of course you would be expected to cheer them up a little bit, right? But somehow I was watching it and the overall tone was so dark and somber. I was asking myself, why? Several days later, we put up a seminar at my university, inviting all North Korean watchers to come and share their views on what they learned from watching the Eighth Party Congress in North Korea. Almost every one of them, they were talking about this particular aspect of the Eighth Party Congress, which was the overall tone, how depressed and frustrated the overall tone was. And if you ask me what my explanation for this uniquely dark tone of the Eighth Party Congress is, I think it is because North Korean leaders came to realize they cannot have something called Pyeongjin policy. And then Pyeongjin policy is, of course, to have it both. When I say have it both, on the one hand, to have nuclear weapons, on the other hand, remove all those sanctions being imposed upon North Korean economy, and then develop North Korean economy. That, in fact, is what is meant by Pyeongjin policy. And I think after Hanoi in 2019, North Korean leaders came to find it, in fact, is not going to happen. I think that would explain this dark and somber tone of Eighth Party Congress this time. And then that in fact is particularly when you juxtapose it with the overall tone of Seventh Party Congress, which was held 5 years ago, then you can just appreciate how depressed the overall tone was. So one of the important lessons would be this, which is now North Korean leaders came to realize they cannot have it both, where they have to give up something. And that, I think, is the reason why, as Jane and everybody suggested, we must take that into consideration as new Biden administration tries to come up with a new North Korean policy, especially with respect to North Korean nuclear issue.
Oh, I was sorry, I was temporarily disconnected, but I'm back. Do we have more time for panel discussion, or shall we move on to the Q&A?
Yes, when you were frozen, Bakjin, we decided to move to Q&A, which was about the right time anyway.
Okay, all right. Let me make a comments on what Ambassador An just described.
Please.
And I think that the somber mood in Party Congress in North Korea was a somber reminder that Pyeongjin policy of North Korea, which is to develop economic situation and also the nuclear development at the same time, is a mission impossible. And I think that Chairman Kim Jong-un is now realizing this inherent problem of his policy. So we hope that North Korea can change its course towards more realistic future of the country through denuclearizing its nuclear armament and come to the dialogue table and work for the peace and stability on the Korean Peninsula. So I think that Biden administration has a big task forward together with the Republic of Korea to formulate a very much strict and thorough workable roadmap of how to persuade North Korea to change its course for the better future of the country.
Could I make one comment relative to this? I don't know how much time we have, but
Please.
it's very interesting what Ambassador An said, and you also support Pak Jin about the need to make a choice. I always thought that the nuclear policy of North Korea is the insurance policy for the Kim family. They figured that without nuclear weapons, they won't survive for a variety of reasons, including incredible cruelty to their own people. Since the US pulled out of the JCPOA in Iran, I think one of the unfortunate lessons of that was that we make an agreement with a emerging nuclear power. They start to, at least arguably, they comply with the agreement, and then we pull out. And I think that made us seem to North Korea unreliable. So I'm wondering, I understand about the choice between the economy and a nuclear program, but why would North Korea at this point trust the US to make an agreement and stick to it?
Because I think that there is no better choice left for North Korea but to realize the situation and make a right choice for the future of the country. North Korea at the moment, I think, is in a very troubled situation due to economic failure, natural disaster, and COVID-19 problems, and also sanctions on the country. So as long as North Korea keeps its position on the nuclear proliferation, and I think there is no way out. So I think we should offer North Korea a better future so that they can make a much more realistic choice. And I think that task is on the new Biden administration and also the Korean government. We should find a way to persuade North Korea while maintaining sanctions and making a coherent policy approach towards the North.
That's a big project. I mean, Mark, do you agree that that's the way forward? Just curious.
Well, I'm of two minds. I guess what I would say is, one, they have been unequivocal, they being the North Koreans, in their strategic direction. Every single signal is that they are going to continue on the nuclear path. You know, and they may or may not be open to some tactical adjustments, you know, small negotiations on the side. I think that's point one. The second point I would say, however, is that I am intrigued by the impact of COVID on the North Koreans, in that they've had to essentially close their borders. The global economic situation has been depressed, and they've also had to crush their own internal markets, essentially self-sanction themselves, and thereby, I think, basically eliminating or substantially reducing coping mechanisms that they've used to survive in past instances. So I think this is there's part of me that thinks there is a glimmer of hope that there is a possibility that in this new situation, there might be a hook in and a way in. Final point I would say is, I tend to still believe that if you do get a hook in, and you are able to get traction on serious negotiations, I do think you will have to couple pressure with an open door. And essentially, I'm in the camp of the phased rollback. Freeze to start, phased reduction over time, years out, and, you know, end game over a small number of weapons. And I'll stop there.
Ambassador An?
Well, as a matter of fact, I think with respect to how we should be making North Korea go in the direction of denuclearization, I think there are two key messages that we must continue to, deliver to North Koreans. One, Pyongyang policy wouldn't work. And then as a matter of fact, as I already told you, that in fact is something I'm observing in Pyongyang. North Korean leaders, they are now beginning to realize it is not going to work. But there is a second message, and that second message has a lot to do with what Jane said, in the sense that now United States entered into JCPOA, now United States suddenly left the JCPOA. How North Koreans could have confidence in what kind of deal they make with the United States. But at the same time, that on the one hand emphasizes the importance of United States as a defender of rule of law to continue to do that on any given global issues. But at the same time, it also tells us how delicate we must be in designing the contents and message to North Koreans. North Korean diplomats often say this, which is, look at Saddam Hussein, look at Gaddafi. If they had nuclear weapons, they would be, well, still there. It is only because they gave them up that they in fact met with those fates. But at the same time, that in fact is a wrong interpretation of history. The way I look upon it would be this, which is, if Saddam Hussein had not threatened the international community as if he was developing weapons of mass destruction, if Colonel Gaddafi had not, well, oppressed in the manner that in fact it oppressed its own people and developing weapons of mass destruction, why United States would have intervened? Why Bush 43? Why Obama would have intervened in Iraq or in Libya? And then as a matter of fact, after the Cold War, all the U.S. presidents, I think there was one, well, in a sense, essential question they tried to address, which was how we could continue to play the leadership in the international community with reduced resources. I mean, with reduced economic and the military resources. I think that has been a key question for any number of U.S. presidents after the Cold War. So, well, the North Koreans look upon nuclear weapons as final guarantee of its own security. I think that's an illusion which, in fact, we must try to North Korean leadership to move away. And then in order to do it, we should be developing very delicate contents and message. Thank you.
Well, thank you, and thank everybody. We are a few minutes already past when we were supposed to close out. I think this is actually the beginning of a broader conversation that's going to be ongoing between the United States and the Republic of Korea on how our alliance should approach the Korean Peninsula and North Korea. And I believe that this is going to be one of the main challenges that we have. And I'm happy to see that the administration, the Biden administration, is approaching this and many other issues with an alliance first approach. So with that, I'd like to thank Ambassador Lippert, Ambassador An, Congressman Park Jin for coming and for participating. Thank the Hyundai Motors and Korea Foundation for their support. I'd like to recognize and thank Jean Lee for her exceptional leadership of the Korea Center. I'm just thrilled that you're on board and thrilled that we brought you on board. And finally, again, I'll finish where we left. I'll finish where we began, thanking Congresswoman Jane Harman for all of her leadership and service to the nation, to the Alliance, and to the Wilson Center. And with that, we'll finish the event. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good evening. Have a good day.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Jane. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Jane.
Thank you all. Thank you all. See you
See you
soon.
again.
Thank
In
you.
Seoul,
Bye-bye.
SOUL.
감사합니다.
I will